Hello. Let's see. So I'm going to talk about lockdown laws uh, around COVID-19 and in general, like the constitutional issue of it. Um, so lockdown laws are unconstitutional. They are, contrary to just any kind of workable system of freedom, of any kind of free uh, government or free country. You can't, obviously you can't have a free country if your government can basically imprison you in your house at any given moment. I mean, people will say, well, yeah, but this is for an emergency. First of all, a lot of y'all didn't really care about the thousands that were dying every single day of the flu last year, the year before, the year before that, year before that, or any number of other diseases. I mean, I think it's interesting that all of a sudden people want to just completely burn the Constitution when they did. I mean, I'm sure the same people were happy to burn it for the flu or even for the common cold, but I guess they were just smart enough to stay quiet about it before. They wouldn't say like, oh yeah, we should force everybody to get the flu shot and we should force everybody to stay inside or something. I don't know what sick thoughts go on inside these authoritarians' heads. I mean, it's very simple. We have something called habeas corpus, which is you cannot be imprisoned unless you're charged with a crime, and then you have a right to a speedy trial. Otherwise governments can just imprison people at will, and that's what's happened with lockdown laws. I mean, of course, the enforcement has, for the most part, been relatively moderate in terms of compared to what it could be or even what it is on the books, like what some of these laws are. Luckily, they're not fully enforced to the full extent of the law, but like I have more tolerance for the controls of businesses, which I don't think those controls are good either, but at least there's some justification for it, arguably, in the sense that all those businesses operate under government issued licenses and they're already basically regulated out the wazoo for any number of other things, building codes and all these other issues. Therefore, the government can argue this is just one more regulation that they have to comply with to retain their license. But you have to be real and see that this regulation, for one thing, it's not always very scientific, because there I think are places being closed that technically you could keep it open if you followed strict standards, and you could still have it open and not have it be a real danger for contagion. But yeah, a lot of these businesses are being totally ruined. And hopefully it will be a learning experience for the country, because it will teach the small business owners that they're not, even though a lot of them like to pretend they're in the big club, they're not. And when push comes to shove, they'll be tossed overboard, while the government bails out all the top banks and everything. They'll be left to, even a lot of the small business owners that have been shilling for capitalism and neoliberalism and trashing on burners and trashing socialists all this time for this system that they thought they were, ensconced in the, or that they were, embedded in the pinnacles of, and some kind of throne in, but then they got thrown out. Like they thought they were on the winning team, and their own damn team threw them right out the window. So, which anybody else could have seen happening, and a lot of them are, dog eat dog mentality. So they can't all really, the capitalist dirtbags among them can't really complain. They're just getting what they've given. But it also shows how much the government controls everything, because a lot of capitalists and neoliberals, whatever, they want to pretend that the economy exists in this vacuum totally distinct from the state, but it's not the case. Like, the state snaps its fingers, and you either, the state can snap its fingers and you own your business and you are the CEO and you're making millions of dollars. Then the state can snap its fingers and say, no, you don't own that business anymore. It's all on paper. It's all from the government. Like, capitalism doesn't exist without the government at all, really. Without the government, it would just be, I don't know, a bunch of people either. I mean, I guess there could be people that love capitalism as it exists so much that they just kind of abide by it, even without a government to enforce it. But vast majority of people would not abide by this system unless there was a government enforcing the extreme, inequality in land and resources, etc. So anyway, like I said from day one, as soon as the lockdown started, I said, they're going to try and use this against us. They're going to try and use this against the left. But a lot of people supposedly, on whatever passes for the left or calls itself the left in America, is like, a lot of them were just trashing the Republicans and libertarians for protesting and demonizing them, calling them terrorists for protesting the lockdown. I mean, that's why we have the tyranny we have in this country, because the only people that aren't cowards, the only people that actually could and would stand up to the government are these libertarian, militia people who the kind of, the Democrats and the leftists both hate. And even though the leftists would claim they hate them for leftist reasons, they both hate them for the same reason, and it's cultural. It's because it's poor rural people who have guns and still think the Constitution matters against, the superior coastal urban leftists or liberals, or, it's the same mindset. They both hate the average American, to be real. So, yeah, I'm not sure how any leftist can support the lockdowns. I mean, I think, like, obviously there have always been authoritarians in the left, but authoritarianism is contrary to leftism. Literally, the left was founded on that one word, liberty. It was like liberty first, liberté, then number two, equalite, equality. So liberty, equality, and then fraternité, fraternity, like solidarity, basically, and friendship. So that's why I don't believe in this modern nonsense of the quote unquote authoritarian left. Like, even the authoritarian, quote unquote authoritarian leftists, the tankies, the Stalinists, even they call libertarian leftists, like Stalinists call Trotskyites and anarchists leftists. They're like, oh yeah, those crazy leftists. So even Stalinists know that they are right wing. Stalinism is right wing. There's nothing like any government that doesn't respect the autonomy of each and every person is right wing to that extent. And people think now that being left wing means wanting the government to control the economy. That's absurd. The governments have always controlled the economy. All through history, governments have controlled the economy. So that would mean Genghis Khan was leftist. That would mean Louis XIV was leftist. No. If that's what you think leftism is, then go off. Go to, I don't know, go to North Korea and live out your best life, I guess. But anyway, leftism, real leftism is libertarianism. It is freedom. That's why we want to, that's why I want land to be equal. That's why I want resources to be equal and democratized, because it's unjust for them to be unequal, and only tyranny can keep them unequal. So therefore, in a libertarian, in a liberal system, they would be equal. So yeah, I don't have time for anybody who's like authoritarian leftist, whether they're Stalinist or whether they're a Pelosi supporter or both, because probably a lot of the Stalinists are Pelosi supporters. Yeah. There's almost nothing I can say to encapsulate how absurd that just the concept of being a leftist and yet being authoritarian. Like if I was authoritarian, I wouldn't call myself a leftist, because literally the left was based on the French left side of the General Assembly, which, as I said, was organized around liberty, specifically, more than anything else, liberty, and then equality and fraternity. So it's just disgusting, and I have no time for any supposed authoritarian leftists or even anybody who thinks that's like a reasonable thing. Like, you either have a connection to liberty and then you're a leftist, or you're not, or you're right wing and you are against liberty. So, and is, I guess maybe it's ironic that a lot of the people who actually do care about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights in this country identify as conservative. I mean, a lot of them are uneducated about like what the origins of conservatism are. And a lot of libertarians don't call themselves conservative anymore. They identify as libertarian, and that's it. Because conservatism was always basically authoritarian. It is authoritarianism. It's basically another name for authoritarianism. So, but I called it, like I said, these lockdowns, these curfews are going to be used against the left. And it took like, what, a month, 2 months for that to be borne out, for them to be beating up black and brown people in the streets based on these COVID curfews. So all these Democrats and even leftists who loved all these lockdowns and hated everybody who opposed the lockdowns and who opposed these curfews and whatever, like they have all that blood on their hand for every single, probably thousands of people beaten in the streets of America, many of them black and brown people, many of them women, beaten senselessly by police, sometimes maimed, based on these COVID lockdowns that y'all just loved and that y'all demonized anybody who opposed. So, yeah, to me, this is war. Like, our Constitution has been burned, destroyed. So therefore, there is no valid government. The government is not valid, any more than if, some aliens came down and just landed in the White House and started issuing laws. No government is valid if it doesn't follow the Bill of Rights, if it's not constitutional. So at the end of the day, it sometimes comes down to just, can they enforce it? We saw in the Midwest when these libertarian people and whatever, like the militiamen stood up, they basically took over the state house, and all the Democrats and leftists cried, bloody murder and called them all terrorists. I would just like to like separate America into two polities, and one can be for the people who want the Constitution, even if that means, I guess, supposedly risking, this risk with COVID. But it's not like even these COVID laws are stopping COVID. So, either way, it's like I just never thought that it would be so easy for so many people to just say the Constitution is worthless. The Constitution is only supposed to be freedom when we want it to be freedom, but when we want it there to be no freedom, then we just do that. Like anybody who's so willing to throw away all of my rights for whatever scenario it is, whoever wants to trap me in my house when I haven't committed a crime, all those people are criminals, just like people who, voted for fascists in Spain and Italy and France were criminals, or, in Germany were criminals. Like, they're fascists. And that, to me, like, I'm very concerned about COVID. And I've been a germaphobe, I guess people called me my whole life. So I'm glad if some people are finally starting to wash their hands and social distance. But to me, the much worse disease is authoritarianism, and like all these evil, Karens supposedly on the left. This is like what we're told. Like, this is the left side is the side that hates freedom. So then just come up with a new name. Literally, the left was founded on one word: liberty. So if you hate liberty, you need a new name for your ideology, because you're not a leftist. I don't know. I almost hope it leads to open, civil war, just for all these like authoritarian Karens who just want to like put other people in jail and send police after other people, but are total cowards themselves and totally worthless, and would last like 10 seconds in any kind of direct confrontation with those of us who support freedom. So that's where I'm at. It's like, if you support me being forced to stay in my house, forced not to, like, there's signs around saying like you can never gather with anybody outside your household. These signs have been up the entire year, basically since like April or whatever. So technically, I'm sure people don't follow it a lot of the time, but people who have followed it, they haven't seen anybody that they've known basically for 6 months, 7 months or whatever. And there's no reason to assume anything will change in the next year or 2 or 3. There's no reason to assume that based on any kind of past history of diseases, that this disease will be less, or be more contained 1 or 2 or even 3 years from now. So if this is the new normal and people can never again see anybody outside their own household, and we can't even debate about it, and anybody who even questions it is denounced by the Democrats and by a lot of the what passes as leftists, as denounced as terrorists and Nazis and mass murderers or something. That, like, if you question authoritarianism, it means you want everybody to get COVID or whatever. So yeah, it's not acceptable to put people in house arrest who haven't committed a crime. It violates the writ of habeas corpus or habeas corpus law. And certainly, I mean, the government has said this specifically, that you shouldn't mandate vaccines. Like, vaccines should never be mandatory, and they're even telling companies that they shouldn't mandate it. They're not forbidding companies from mandating it, but they're telling companies they shouldn't. So, I guess best case scenario, that will hold and they'll stick by that. But a lot of Democrats and supposed leftists are not anywhere near as smart as even the government is. Like, even the government knows, like, you could never force a vaccine on 300 million people or whatever it is, unless you want to die. Unless you want a revolution. But a lot of the Democrats and SJW leftist partisans are in favor of a mandated vaccine. I've seen on Twitter and Facebook people promoting it and saying, oh yeah, it should be mandatory. So it's very disgusting that people think that's like, and it just shows, like, if they get power, then that's what we have to look forward to. If those type of authoritarian minded Democrats and fake leftists get power, then they'll mandate everything in life. They'll control. I mean, if you can mandate vaccines, then, I mean, it's like, you basically, once you've decided that the government knows what's best for people to put in their body, knows, can regulate when and where people are, like where people are allowed to go, and basically trap you in your house, force you to take a vaccine, then, you're basically in jail. It's like in jail. I'm sure it's the same. Like, they'll give you something. Although even in jail, they might not mandate vaccines or anything. But so yeah, in that sense, you'd be worse off in their future, in this Democrat fake leftist future. You'd have less freedom than you might actually have in jail right now under the neolib, neocon fascists that are in control. So just as many of Trump's supporters are much worse, like a trillion times more racist and bigoted than he is, a lot of the Dems and the leftist supporters, like rank and file, are a trillion times even more authoritarian and arrogant than even like Biden or even the leading kind of woke mob are. So all right, I guess I'll leave it at that. But basically, if you if it gets worse, if there's more controls, if they do try to mandate a vaccine, it will be civil war. And I can say that I will never again trust anybody that supported these lockdowns, because I have social media and I see people who are all about civil liberties up until like, oh no, there's a disease. Civil liberties suck. Throw out just entirely not only civil liberties, but anybody who cares about them. So I will never trust anybody who supported this lockdown stuff. Y'all are fascists. And yeah, I do hope there will be justice, and the people who have promoted tyranny in this time will get theirs. But until then, stay free, stay as free as you can in this world, and take care.